the technology then seems to fade out until the 1930s and 1940s, when round built seemed to reintroduce.
Well, it didn't disappear. It faded. I mean, it was faded because of fashion, and
Yes.
photography was becoming more developed.
Yeah.
The Lumiere brothers were getting film, which was terribly exciting. So I think there was
It faded out of
these
prominence.
fashions.
Yes.
But I mean, this is one of my personal favorite little stereoscopes, and it's an Edwardian design, and it was made probably all through till the 1920s, even possibly the 1930s.
And it's a book, isn't it?
And it looks like a little book. It's a little tin box, but it actually opens to be a little stereoscope, and it was meant as a souvenir. There were French ones as well, and they almost all seem to focus on traveling, and it actually describes it as with real photographic stereograms. And this one is 12 Views of Bournemouth that I have. It's in rather poor shape, unfortunately, but it does actually work very well. So these things never quite disappeared, but they had new surges of popularity. Brownbilt in Germany made this very neat folding
Quite
stereo.
sort of modern functional, isn't it?
Yes, I mean it looks visually.
Yeah,
there's a
completely
big
different to
design
that one.
change
Yes.
there, and these had. I mean, there's particularly lots of German stereo views of Nazi propaganda and war images that fit this format.
Yeah.
Were made for this stereoscope.
Okay.
And had
So it was deployed in some
exciting
ways for
new life.
propaganda purposes.
I think it was. I mean, the images are pretty striking, really.
Yes. Of that period.
Yes.
Yeah. And Air Forces used stereo 3D images in the Second World War to get better intelligence about what the enemy was doing on the ground. How did that work?
Again, we're starting with two-dimensional images,
Yes.
and putting them together to make a three-dimensional image. There were Strategic Air Command. This is the War Office had, which is a stereo viewer that you could work with two photographs.
And essentially the plane would have two cameras taking...
No, the plane would have one camera.
Okay.
But these are sequential.
Yes.
So the farther away you get from your object, the farther apart you can be between the two images.
Right.
So I took this from a hot air balloon at Maple Durham House.
Yeah.
And the balloon is travelling. I took one photograph and then a second photograph, which is just what the Air Force would have done with their airplanes flying over Germany.
Yeah.
Putting the two photographs just next to each other and looking at it with the stereo view, and it's three-dimensional, which helped them to see things that were camouflaged, that would be invisible from a two-dimensional photograph, but suddenly reveal itself with a three-dimensional photograph.
Yes.
And to help them to understand topography when they were planning raids and bombing campaigns.
The RAF used it for discovering the V1 and the V2 rockets.
Yes. Yes, that was a really fundamental and incredibly useful thing
to be able to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, it was considered a huge asset.
Yeah. After the war, new viewing devices called Viewmasters came on the market. How successful were they?
Well, again, this is the newest fashion. This is one of the first Viewmasters, which looks terribly antiquated to us now, but it works just in the same way as the Viewmasters we're more familiar with. And this is my husband's childhood Viewmaster.
And Viewmaster was an American company?
It was an American company, but again, it was successful. Enormously successful and successful internationally, and there were other versions of this, but this is that has
images on a wheel, doesn't it?
This is the reel that made. You have on opposite ends. You would have the pair of images. Yeah. And when they were put together, you have the normal two things. This is very straightforward because your left eye is seeing one image and your right eye is seeing the other. Yeah. The lenses only magnify the image so that it feels your view of vision.
Yeah.
It doesn't actually do anything more magical than that.
But the skill
Your
of
brain
that
does
is
the
that you have a
worst.
range of images in a single go. So it's like you keep pressing the
Yes,
button
there'd
and
be
you get
seven
another
images
image.
on each reel, which
Yeah.
was great fun. So it was easy to tell stories
Yeah.
with this. This one is one of the reels for Snow White,
Yeah.
which has some of my favourite images on it.
And what was the camera used to shoot these new stereo 3D images?
No, this was a wonderful advance. Handsome stereo realist camera, which is an American camera, and took slides, and in a very similar way to the Viewmaster, you would have two slides mounted, but on an individual card, and this just lasted, and was the camera of choice of a lot of stereoscopic photographers until very, very recently, when Fuji produced a stereoscopic camera.
Yeah, and by comparison, the Fuji camera is much smaller.
It's certainly lighter.
Yes,
this
that's
is
a monster.
quite an investment in energy to carry this around, but it's a gorgeous camera, and stereoscopic photographers will still choose to use this.
Yeah.
But then Fuji invented this very neat little W1 camera, and it's now a W3 that's digital.
Yeah.
It gives you a lenticular image to see the image on the back.
in
so
3D
you're seeing
on
it
the
in
back.
3D.
Yeah.
And it works as easily as any digital camera, and it's very lovable.
And where will this technology go, do you think, in the future? What's the next thing that will happen to it? I understand you were telling me about Nintendo DS.
Well,
putting it into...
Yes, I mean it is in games now. That is hugely popular, and I think, and of course the films and 3D televisions. So it's again on a real wave of popularity. But I think what people are trying to find is a way of eliminating the viewer. And for instance, the Fuji does that in allowing you to see the image in the back with lenticular images, and I think developing this technology, which a lot of the games consoles already do, so they have moving images and still images that you can see without having glasses or a viewer, and I think that's where the
technology will go.
Yes, I think people have been longing for that all the time, because I have all these wonderful stereo views, which I find delightful, but are also, in a way, the problem, because they all have their different formats and different focal lengths, and to get stereo images that are the right size for the stereo viewer. Yeah. But that's limiting.
Yes.
As well as
there's no single technology format. Yeah.
And to be free of that, to just have a viewer that, to not need a viewer, but to just be able to see an image in three dimensions without having to get that extra viewer, some people have difficulty in actually having a stereoscopic vision, and that it can be very tiring for them to be watching 3D films or a long film with glasses, for instance.
I find some of the 3D images is a bit like 2D images put, it's like those paper theatres where the characters sort of seem to stand in 3D, but the images are just 2D images in 3D. Yes. What works best in terms of 3D stereoscopic images? What's the most resolved and the most satisfactory?
Well, this layering is possibly lazy production, because it's the easiest way of doing that. And obviously, if you're looking at my hand, that hand, and my face, there isn't a lot of depth here, and your mind more or less processes that as a flat image.
Yes.
But something that's gives you more sense of depth and more ability to see depth, your mind registers as being more three-dimensional, and that becomes more interesting. So I think, through illustration, I've been creating my own three-dimensional images, and it's something I have to think about very carefully, because in real life, your brain makes all kinds of calculations, but somehow when you're seeing it in a slightly more abstract way, as a three-dimensional image, you're more aware of the problems of that than the possibilities.
Finally, you've done this with a children's book, haven't you? Show us how you've put it together.
Well, having realized to my surprise that I could actually control 3D images, I approached a publisher to use that technology.
Yeah.
Extremely simple technology to bring
for a book called a Present for Father
So
Christmas.
it's called A Present for Father Christmas.
Yeah.
Or A Present from Santa Claus.
Yeah.
If you're on the other side of the Atlantic.
Yeah.
Or various other languages. And it's a pop-up book with ordinary pop-ups.
Yeah, which is another technology altogether that you're...
One of the things I quite liked about this was playing with the notion of 3D.
Yeah.
So you have paper creating 3D images. You have a two-dimensional illustration that gives you the
illusion
in your imagination of a 3D image.
Yeah.
And then you actually have a pop-up that becomes a stereoscopic viewer.
Yeah.
And Santa's house.
You can look into Santa's house.
There are lenses in the windows, which help you to control the image that's printed on the back of it. It's a stereoscopic image that I created, painted, and printed on the back of it. So when you look into the viewer, you see the house filled with Santa and dancing ring of elves in 3D. Yeah. And one of my very favourite comments was a 5-year-old girl who, her father was reading the story to her and he allowed her to look in the book. I think he was rather tempted to look first, but he did allow his daughter to look at the viewer first. And she said, she just about came off the ground and said, "Oh, Mommy, Daddy, look inside, it's real inside."
Dana, thank you very much for talking to me today.